Yeah, well, if you get that like good filtered water.
Welcome to another edition of Thunderdome!
Welcome to Thunderdome. We've entered into a new unit, Unit 7, Political Parties and Elections, and we start off with 7.1, the structure and organization of political parties.
Yes, sir.
Now, in a regular year, I would absolutely force you to watch this political parties rap video that is so terrible
Can we
that
watch
you would
it?
hate it so
Yo,
much.
let's watch it.
Let's watch it, please.
But I will not do that right now.
Come on.
Come on.
I might do it at the end.
Yes.
All right, so here we are. Structure and organization of political parties. Promise me that you won't get offended by anything that I say.
Yep.
Just kidding.
Lol.
All right. So I gotta figure that. Look at these 42 chats up here. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. So political parties. Obviously, you kind of know what they are. Organization of people who hold similar views about how government should operate. They attempt to influence government by electing candidates who share similar beliefs. If you're not aware, we kind of have just two really influential political parties here in the United States. We'll talk about some other types of political parties in the United States that we have that do get things done, but at the same time they don't hold as much weight as Republicans and Democrats. So, obviously, we've already talked about this too. One-party system, multi-party system, and the two-party system, which we have in the United States. One-party system, examples, North Korea, China, Iran. Imagine a communist country or a theocracy, so something that was actually, it's kind of guided by religion. Those would all pretty much be one-party systems. And then multi-party systems, which I kind of want that to happen here in the United States, but we're a two-party system still because there's only legit two options for us. There's only two winners ever whenever it comes to general elections, which is major presidential elections. So the multi-party system, 3 or more parties compete. Canada, 3 parties. Germany, 5 parties. Israel, over 20 parties. And that's awesome. To have options like that and to have, I don't know, I mean, the older I get as a United States citizen, it's so crazy to me that I have 2 choices at the end of it, and usually they're both so old. I don't get it. I want younger, more choices. That's what I want as a United States citizen, and for some reason, we're nowhere near that.
I always get mixed up. Which party is which?
It was the hope
Like
of the founder.
which one's the donkey and which one's the elephant?
We're getting that today.
Donkeys, Democrats.
Okay, so that right there was George Washington. He basically said on his farewell speech out of his presidential terms that factions, political factions, that's what he called them, we're going to tear this country apart. He said, stay away from them. Guess what we didn't do?
We didn't stay away.
We didn't stay away from them. We continue down the path of these like divided factions, like he said. And back then it was pretty much John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson, and they split off and they created these political parties, and we're still in it today. So the growth of American parties. So the United States Constitution does not mention political parties. George Washington warned against them. So a tradition of 2 major political parties in the United States, the Democratic Party roots. Thomas Jefferson, originally called the Democratic Republican Party, if that makes any sense to you. A limited power of the federal government, that's what they wanted. They wanted pretty much the power to belong to the states and the people. And then it split in 1828 into the Democrats and the Whigs. We no longer have the Whigs. It's very cut and dry now between Democrats and Republicans. Then the Republican Party roots, they were founded by anti-slavery Democrats. and Whigs. It was the party of Abraham Lincoln, and that's what kind of continues today. Even though eventually, when these things exist long enough, they flip-flop. And they have the other point of view than they actually started with. If you've had any experience in like looking at this through a historical viewpoint, you see this happen, and it's odd. All right, third parties. So the ones that can't win, at least they can win some.
Minor roles.
Yeah, like House of Representative seats they could win. They could be independent and win that,
Yeah, are there
or senator.
independents on the?
There are, but very few. So major role, they influence elections rather than win them. So they play the spoiler. So what happens is, let's just say this happens, whatever, in 2024. So let's say that Trump decides to run again, but the Republican Party won't back him. So he runs as a third party.
He won't get elected.
He won't get elected, and neither will the Republican. Why? Because Trump took Republican votes. That's that's what could happen.
So like if he went as a third party, he would take some of the Republican votes, but they still wouldn't be enough, and then some other Republicans would still vote for the Republican, but there would never be enough.
Right.
So the Democrat would.
The Republican Party would be split,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't be able to get anybody elected. So, what do you think would happen? What would be the smart move by the Republican Party?
To not make Trump. To accept him, I guess, because like.
Exactly, to accept his candidacy, because if they don't, they will split, and they'll lose.
That's what happened this year, almost, because, like, Republicans are almost split to where some of them hate Trump, absolutely hate Trump, and some of them love him.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, right? There's some anti-Trumper Republicans out there, I guess, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting little game that they play, pretty much. But the third party is the spoiler. So third parties have never won a presidential election, and they rarely win other major elections. It's a two-party tradition in the United States. We've already talked about that. They can't raise enough funds to compete. The amount of money that the Democrats and Republicans can raise is unbelievable. Because...
You think the third party ever will rise up?
Yeah, I do, but maybe not in our lifetime. Yeah, they can raise so much money. I mean, the people that back the Republican and Democratic Party, I mean, you're talking about people that own the biggest corporations in the world. So they would freely give massive amounts of money to make sure that their candidate that is going to protect their interest in a corporation is going to win. Also, third parties need a lot of signatures to get on the ballot. We'll look at that through the election process through
Wasn't
this
the whole
chapter.
News Party Roosevelt's?
Yes. Yeah. Third parties also influence policy of the two major parties. So populists, progressives, bull moose. We'll talk about this here in a second. So, leading third party presidential candidates in history. This is pretty interesting to look at. So this is from 1948 to 2000, and then we have the popular vote in thousands. So if you look at it, there's only one number that is like staggering, and it's the 19,742 times 1,000. And that's the only big turnout we've ever had, and that was in 1992. And that was an interesting thing because this is the moment that Bill Clinton gets elected, and Ross Perot actually stole votes away, from George Bush, the first George Bush, because he's a third party, and he ran. He had his own money. He was rich, and he put himself out there, and he had primetime spots. He bought commercials. He did everything. And he stole so many votes, which allowed Clinton to get elected. All right. Boo. Okay, types of third parties. Single issue parties. So these third parties just raise one particular issue and they bring it to the forefront and the two other parties have to talk about it. So single issue parties. They promote a social, economic, or moral issue. So there was a prohibition party and guess what they wanted?
No alcohol.
Yeah, they wanted to ban alcohol. This is a very crazy thing in the early 1900s. I don't know if you've ever heard of the temperance movement. So before the early 1900s, we were called a nation of drunkards. And what happened was we had hard liquor kind of hit us hard, right after the Civil War. People started making moonshine, and it was a little bit different than beer. And people got drunk and stayed drunk. And domestic violence came, and poor work habits, and
I'm pretty sure some of my distant cousins make moonshine in West Virginia.
yeah. And what ends up happening is you have a political movement called the temperance movement comes along, and they say, we want sober people. We want sober people in the United States. And it continues, and it continues, and then what happens is the Prohibition Party comes up, and then the two major parties have to fight over it, and they have to pick a side. Prohibition or not. And guess which side won? The Prohibition side. And, you know, for whatever, I think it was 15 years, alcohol is illegal in the United States on the federal level because of a third party. Then we have ideological parties, so they support a particular philosophy or political doctrine, so they want to change society in major ways. So we have Socialist Party, Libertarian Party. The Socialist Party would obviously be like government run, everybody gets universal basic income. So if you ever see UBI in the political realm and you see a stance on UBI, that's that person's stance on universal basic income, which would be giving the American people money every single month.
So like a doctor gets paid the same as like a bus driver or something.
I think you could still probably make more money by let's say that there's a poverty level line. You would have to, the government would compensate you to get to that point at least. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then everybody's just equal, right?
Yeah, but that's the problem with, a lot of people say socialism, you don't have any room to, the American dream is crushed.
Yeah.
Is what a lot of people say with the socialism. And then with the Libertarian Party, basically just says, don't touch me. Government, leave me alone. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be self-sustaining. My rights are my rights. Don't tell me what to do, type of thing. That's libertarian in at least the short version of it. Each party has a platform. Here's the exit ticket, everybody. Each party has a platform. So that is a document that expresses the party's positions on election issues. So, all right. What is the platform made up of? Little pieces of wood called planks. So each individual part of the platform. So this communicates to voters what the party will do if it wins. And can you lie?
Mm-mm.
Does that happen every once in a while though?
Yes.
That you actually run on one thing and then guess what? You don't do it? I mean, this is a good example. The Democratic Party ran on, we're going to give you $2,000 if you vote us in.
They did not, did they?
They gave us $1,400 because they said that the $600 that came before this was added into it. But they didn't do that, the Republicans did.
Oh.
So did they truly hold up, to what they ran on? Not necessarily. Did they hold up to it enough to not get,
Caught.
not caught, but just like,
Put in their place.
yeah, or just be like, hey, you lied to us, Yeah, they did. Oh, Nate's joining. Okay, so. All right, political ideology. So pay attention here because a lot of people get confused on this. A person's set of underlying ideas and beliefs through which they understand politics. So gauging one's view of change in society, politics, and the role of the government. So let's go through this one by one. This is what it looks like in one place. You've seen this before, you've heard this before. You have the far left, and you have the far right. So the far left would be radicals, and the far right would be reactionaries. We'll look at those. They actually have very similar characteristics where they both use violence. Then you get closer and closer to the middle where we tend to meet and compromise. So, on the far left we have the radical ideology. So ideology that embraces drastic and rapid progressive change in the structure of society. Sometimes you use extreme methods like violence or revolution. So on the far left, imagine a Democrat, a liberal that uses violence.
That would never happen.
So I think in these times right now, you would know those that group as being called Antifa. Okay? All right. Then we have liberals, which would be what we would just know as, Democrats at this moment. So spectrum of political ideology that support more gradual, modest, progressive change. The federal government should do more, be more directly involved. So this is where you would think of this thing called big government. So liberals are down with big government. They don't mind government having their hands in everything. So government-led political and social reform, government intervention in the economy, increased federal services, and less military. So this is closely associated with the Democratic Party. Then we have the middle, which a lot of people are here. A lot of people could say that they're Democratic or Republican, but if you took a political ideology test, which I put on Canvas if you want to take it, you would realize and you would see that everybody is right around the middle. I don't know if you've ever heard of a bell curve or a normal distribution, but that's what it is. When you take this test, everybody ends up right next to each other, right in the middle. We're so much closer than you think we are, even though the media does a great job of dividing the two political parties. So center middle. So most content with the status quo that shares the viewpoints of both liberals and conservatives. So they have different viewpoints on different things. They might be pro-life, right? Which I mean, anti-abortion. And they could, on the other side of everything, think that guns should be regulated. You could think both of those things. People do think both those things. The media pushes it out there that, guess what?
You have to be one or the other.
You have to be one or the other, and that's silly.
It's silly.
The media is pretty stupid.
Silly.
Then we have conservatives, so we're moving to the right of the spectrum here. So we would probably be talking about the Republican Party here. So support little to no change, the status quo, everything's fine how it is. Or modest retrogressive change, actually like decreasing taxes would probably be a good thing that the Republicans want. Larger federal government threatens the citizens' freedoms. They don't want big government, they want small government. See you guys later. So hands-off economics. Social problems should be handled by states, local government, which I don't know if you think about that or not, but if you wanted government to change, would you try to get the federal government to change or local government to change first?
Federal. Oh wait, local.
Right. It's actually, yeah, it starts from the bottom and it trickles up. The federal government takes forever to change. That's why you see it with these marijuana laws, right? States change marijuana laws and then federal government still says illegal. All right? And then they want the stronger military. So again, closely aligned with the Republican Party. And then we have the far right. So far right support rapid, drastic, retrogressive change. They want to go backwards. Okay, so again, less taxes, less government involvement. So they want to focus on the past. They're often willing to use extreme methods like violence and revolution. I think a good example of this, I think their names are the Proud Boys. Have you ever heard of that?
I think a good example is when, the people like ran into the Capitol.
So these reactionary far-right people, yes, they probably did. Those are the people, the types of people politically, talking about their ideology. They're reactionary. Okay? All right. We done for today. Yay!